All right, we'll wait a bit for everyone else.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I have to check out that stack blitz. It might be good.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially you can immediately start with Angular, for example. You have, with one click, you have an Angular project there and you don't have to build your local environment for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it all looks pretty good. Has everything pre-built. Well, I would say that everyone's pretty much at that point in HTML where everything else is just going to be like more complicated than you're ever going to really use. There's a couple things that you use eventually, but for the most part, we're kind of at the, top end of HTML. So it might be fun to learn Angular and while learning that, finish up HTML.
Yeah, that, that would work. I never, as I said, I never really got my head around Angular.
Yeah. I
And
wonder
that
if you can use
is
Firebase
since,
with this.
since I prefer JavaScript to TypeScript.
Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah, that's another hassle with Angular.
One kind of like meme within Angular is that um everyone knows TypeScript exists, but no one uses TypeScript because everything you can do in JavaScript you can do in TypeScript. There's a couple things to do with like you do have to declare like is it a string or an integer. Um
Exactly. You have,
yeah.
and that was one of the things I like in JavaScript, that it's intelligently try to understand what type it is, so you don't have to type it.
Yeah, but there's like as an Angular developer who hates TypeScript as well, there's a lot of ways to get around TypeScript. For one, instead of doing like, in TypeScript, you have to use a colon and then the type of variable it is. You can also just do type any and then it makes it a normal variable. There is also a line called ts ignore, and it lets you just ignore the TypeScript part for the next line.
Oh, okay.
So like, if you have some kind of weird error that like TypeScript is screwing things up, you can just do ts ignore and then it's fine. But yeah, I'll show a couple of things like that. But yeah, I don't know the point of TypeScript. I feel like we're JavaScript developers. We like JavaScript.
Yes. And yeah, obviously, so the people who say TypeScript is better than JavaScript, they don't like exactly the point that makes JavaScript so easy. That's the thing. They come from more structured languages, and
Yeah.
they don't like this free flow of JavaScript. I also know a lot of people who really they come from object orientated and they don't like this prototyping of JavaScript. So they
Yeah.
try all ways around to avoid this prototyping. They use JavaScript because they have to, but actually they don't like it at all.
Mhm. Yeah. I think most people tend to, prefer the type of language that they start off in. And at least once you found the language you like, whenever you try to use something else, you just end up using the original language, just different syntax. Um, but that's why I do like Python is fun because it's not trying to be something so different. It's very similar to JavaScript. It just adds some extra stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
So already 10 minutes in. Do you think anyone
Yeah.
else is coming here?
I guess not. Yeah, I guess we'll just go ahead and start. We have the recording, they can watch the recording and such. Um, yeah, okay.
You want to start with Angular today, or
Yeah, I think I am. I think Angular is a very good thing to learn. Especially because it's an actual tool, right? It's something that people are going to be using, in when getting actual jobs and stuff. It's a currently used thing. Um, and really, there's not a ton of point in learning everything there is to know about jQuery because you're not going to use jQuery. If you do
anymore?
apply to a
You
job that
don't do
they
anymore?
want to use jQuery, then yeah, you can then learn jQuery. But you know, most jobs are going to want like React or Angular, and then whatever other language you just learn that one.
Hmm.
All right, let me see here. All right, so for people in the recording, we are going to use instead of REPL a website called StackBlitz. I'll share my screen here. Um, StackBlitz seems to be a lot like REPL. I just got introduced to it by Chris here. And looks like it lets you do REPL stuff, but with more modern tools. Um, let's see. I did notice that to make an account, you do need a GitHub account, but let me double check that.
Well, you can do it without, but if you want to share later, you have to log in with your GitHub. Yes, I did
Hmm.
already.
All right, let me just. Okay, yeah, you don't actually need the account. But if you do want to make an account here to save it for later, we'll probably save on its own. Like REPL does save on the browser, but just to show people, there is a site called GitHub, um, and it is a site that we will use soon. And especially if we're actually are writing Angular, then we could start hosting an actual server soon. We can move our code from StackBlitz to GitHub, and then we can maybe we'll set some stuff up with Firebase and then host from there. But we'll see. But anyways, here's the website called GitHub. It is a code, well, primarily a code storage place. Basically a place to put your code that's on the cloud and not the local environment. Not really a problem when we're using REPL, but for a lot of coders, they do local environments and they want a place to, save their code in case their computer dies. They drop their computer in the ocean, now the entire website is gone. So a lot of people save their code on GitHub. Also, companies use them to have multiple people working on code. Generally, a great thing to have. You can just go here, make an account. You won't use it much right now, but you will in the future. Every coder needs to have a GitHub account. And then you can use that GitHub account to log into StackBlitz if you would like. But when on StackBlitz, we can go to the Angular tab. Looks like create a new project. You can just go straight to Angular. And there we go. And we have the entire Angular project already made. Let me zoom in here. All right, is that good? Can you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. Oh, okay. Huh. I did not know you could use the version like that. Okay. So let's go over what Angular is. Angular is a framework. A framework is a relatively new development. It is a entire code base built on top of JavaScript. Basically, like just like how jQuery is built on top of JavaScript, where you write jQuery and it compiles down, or it is rewritten in full JavaScript code. Angular is a lot like that. It will be compiled down to JavaScript. All the things in Angular that you can do in Angular are rewritten afterwards into pure JavaScript. Um, Let me see here. One thing about Angular is that it does have a bit of a learning curve. Unlike Angular's kind of like main, I don't want to say rival because they're not really like rivals, but main, other counterpart is React. React's pretty easy to learn, but gets harder as you go. Angular is a bit difficult to learn. It has a very non-JavaScript like structure, but once you learn it, it is very easy to use and it's very powerful. So let's look at these files that Stackblitz has generated for us. We have a bunch of different files here with names that we're probably not very familiar with. We do see index.html. We know what that is. So let's see what they have in their index.html. And they have almost nothing. They just have a component called my app. You may notice right away, my
HTML
app.
tag. It's an
Sorry, second.
HTML tag. It's an HTML tag. Why you call it component?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I guess actually I shouldn't call it a Well, yeah. Thank you for calling me out on that. Component is actually the Angular way of calling these. But yeah, this is actually an HTML tag. But it's not, a normal HTML tag. It's called my app. That's because it is actually a component. And that's how Angular works. We basically make custom tags, and then we have in another file the actual code for that tag. And we call these custom tags components. The my app, for example, is a component. And we just have loading here so that like if their browser didn't like run Angular properly, then we still have something, to show here. But the tag my app can actually be found. You see you have up here an app folder. Just open that up, and you can see app.component.html. Let's click on that. Not sure what that is. No, it's in okay. Hello.component.tf. No, sorry. Okay, that has app. Wait, where did I just find this? No. Sorry, here I had just found where the code was. Um. Okay, so it has name here. Oh, never mind. Okay, I do see it. Yes, it is in the app.component.html. Just got a little confused. You see in here, this file, app.component.html, you have a p tag. And you see the text here, start editing to see magic happen. You may also notice that in app.component.html, you have another tag called hello with like some kind of weird thing here. And again, these are all Angular components. Inside this component, the my app component, we have another component, hello. And most Angular websites will just like keep going down like that. You have a component that has a component that has a component. Almost everything is kind of put together in its own little bundle. This is an awful lot, like just one line of code is an awful lot to have an entire component for, but later you find, like your nav bar will be an entire component, or your length area will be a component, your table will be a component. But let's keep looking around here. We have app.component.html, but how does this become a tag? We have another component here called app.component.ts. TS, it stands for TypeScript. It is like JavaScript, but more confusing. For the most part, there won't be many differences, but you see the small differences as we go along. For the most part, though, we would try to not use TypeScript and just be writing JavaScript. So let's go into the app.component.ts. And you will find this very confusing looking code right here. Let's go over just line by line what this does. First of all, we have this weird looking thing, import, and then curly braces, a couple things, and from Angular core. What this is doing is it's importing from the very large file that has everything to do with Angular. We're importing just this stuff we want. To illustrate that, you see, do they have their, okay, they don't have their node files up here. Yeah, normally you would have your node files, but if you go to package.json, this file down here, you can see all this stuff is stuff that StackBlitz has imported for you. It's excuse me. It's a ton of code that you are using when you write Angular. Just like in jQuery, where we had to add that little link to be able to use jQuery, in here, we're just, instead of having a link that goes to jQuery, all the code jQuery has that we're using, we're just bringing in all that code. We're bringing in Angular animations, Angular common, Angular compiler, Angular core, all this stuff we're bringing in. And StackBlitz is doing that all for us, so we don't have to worry about it too much. And if you had a normal, like, local area, you could actually see your node modules, or you could see the code Angular is using, all that code you're importing. But for now, if you go back to our app.component.ts, we can see here we're importing from Angular core component. This is because Angular is a really big file. And when we load our website, we don't want to have to load the entirety of Angular every time we load the website. It would make, opening our website take a very long time. And the main purpose of all website building is to get that magical area of less than 2 seconds. I think it was 3 seconds, where if your website took more than 3 seconds to load, almost everyone would just click away. So, sorry, excuse me. The idea is that if you just grab little things like component from the entire file of Angular, then you can add just a little bit of code from Angular. Don't worry about this too much. We'll go into it more later, but just understand that the idea is you are grabbing the pieces of code you want to use from the giant file that is Angular. It'd be like in jQuery, just grabbing the $sign thing, or the ability to grab certain tags. just grabbing that part or just grabbing the dot click function of jQuery. Because, to be honest, you don't need everything jQuery has to offer. jQuery has a lot of things it can let you do. You don't need all of them. But jQuery is small enough that it's fine. But in Angular, it's so big that we want to grab just the stuff we need. All right. Next line. And in fact, this line is a whole lot here. You got at component. You see this at sign a lot. It's a lot like in jQuery where we did a lot of those dollar signs. But in Angular, it's an at sign. Just like here, we have at Angular. Angular starts with an A, so they do at a lot. At component, and then you have these parentheses and curly braces. And inside it, you have the word selector, and then my app. Basically, the component keyword creates the tag. It creates the my app tag. So you give the selector, you call it my app, and then you give the template URL, which is the link, or like I guess you can call it a link, the link to the actual file where you have your HTML. We'll go over the notation of how to write these in a second, but you can just see here app.component.html. And you see right next to this file, you have app.component.html, and that's this code. So a lot like, if you remember on REPL, when we wanted our script.js, there's a tag for that, and in that tag, there's a link to the script.js. This is the same thing. You just do template URL and then the name of the file that will contain your HTML. And then finally, same thing with style. You just get the style URLs. Here we have app.component.css. And right here, we have app.component.css. And if you click on it, you see very simple CSS right now, just changes the font family to Lato. So that's what the component keyword is doing. We're getting the component keyword from the entire Angular library, and then we're using it to create a tag. We're giving it the name of the tag. We're giving it the HTML that the tag will run, or that the tag will be or represents. And we're giving it the styles, the style sheets that are actually, connected to it. All right. And finally, the last line here, export class app component. This has two uses. One, it gives it actually does the finishing touch there using this export. That's how you're actually giving the component to Angular, telling Angular, okay, here it is. It's an important line here. The other thing is this app component. This is just the name of this file. We'll get more to this later, but basically all your component files need to be linked in one even bigger file. But we'll get to that in a second. And then if you see in the curly braces here is where we actually put our JavaScript. You see here we have app.ts. It is in fact a TypeScript or a JavaScript file, and in between the curly braces is where we're going to put our JavaScript. But again, I'll get to that later. Any questions so far?
You have a preview already on your right side. How did you get this?
Yes. This is actually just because StackBlitz has already put all this code for us. If you see here, I already have all the code to create this. I have a component maker giving the selector my app and giving the HTML file, or this one, which has start editing to see some magic happen. In fact, I can edit real quick. Just hello world.
No, I mean,
save it.
I couldn't find the run. I couldn't find the run button.
Oh,
Where
yeah.
did you run it?
Actually, it seems StackBlitz has a automatic runner. Basically, whenever you save, it automatically runs it. If you see here, hello world, I click save or Command F or Control F, depending on your computer, and it will automatically run it for me. Or here, let me
Um,
add a bunch of text here,
um,
and then I click
can I
Command
share my
F.
screen because it doesn't
Yes.
work with me?
Here, I'll stop share.
Um, a minute. Where's the screen record? There. So as you can see, I don't have the preview on the right. It's empty.
Huh. Um, try like going on a piece of code, adding a space somewhere, and then just doing Command Save or Command S.
Okay. No.
Huh. Oh, I see. It seems to be loading it. Like if you see right next to the link with Angular Ivy, there's an X, whereas mine have like the refresh
Yeah.
sign. So I bet try refreshing StackBlitz. That should help.
No. Hmm.
Huh. Yeah,
No,
I
it
would
doesn't.
say it's a loading problem here.
In the console, everything's fine.
Let me. I wonder if there's a way to have StackBlitz
And
like run less stuff.
we can have a look at the. Yeah, there's failed to load something here.
Yeah, I'm getting that too. That's just like a no module thing.
Oh, you get this one too. Okay.
Oh wait, not the photo resource. Let me see.
Hmm.
Let me. I try leaving StackBlitz and coming back, just like closing it and then opening it again.
Or maybe I use a different browser. Give me a moment.
Maybe.
I will try Google. I will try Chrome.
Yeah, it seems that StackBlitz is being slow. Oh, hmm. Trying to share my screen here. There we go. All right. I'll go ahead here and carry
Sure.
on for a little bit. Hmm. Oh yeah, see, when I started up, it had this big like starting dev server on the right. And if you're not getting that, it probably means that it's still trying to connect to it. Oh, now mine's
Yeah,
taking a while.
I didn't get this. Maybe it's my ad blocker, I guess.
Yeah, it seems to not be connecting. Maybe it's a like maybe running Zoom at the same time just takes it a while. Um, will here. Why don't we go ahead and just go through the lesson a bit and just like type in the code
Oh,
and then uh we'll see after class if like outside of Zoom it works.
mhm. So with you, it works again, right? You have
Yeah,
your thing on the right. Yeah,
but,
with
but I
me,
have like good internet and stuff.
Chrome,
So,
even on Google Chrome, nothing appears on the right.
huh?
Yeah, okay.
All right. All right. One thing I also noticed about Stack Blitz is that they have like an auto linter, and a linter is something where like, let's say what if I misspell that? No, okay. It like cleans up your code for you. Like if I add a couple inters here and then save my code, it takes them away. I don't love that, but we'll go with it. All right. So basically, all this is doing here is just, again, creating the actual tag. Um, and now let's quickly go over the point of this export class app component. Because basically, what you're creating here is called a class. It is, not going to get over into the specifics of what a class is, but it's not like class in HTML. It's a little more complicated. But basically, if you go to your app.module.ts down here, you will see a confusing area. We are actually importing a few things from Angular, you see here. We're also importing app component from app component, and same with hello component here. The idea is that just because you have this little app component or app.component.ts area doesn't mean that it's actually connected to Angular. So what you need to do is in your app modules, you actually import the name of your component, which you define here, export class app component. This is the name of the component. You're then importing it into your app.module from the file. You also notice you don't need the .ts, just app.component. And then in your declaration, you are declaring it here. Very complicated, but don't worry about that right now. We'll just, Stack Blitz already did that all for us, so we won't do that right now. We'll do it again when we actually create a new component. But for now, we'll just keep going through stuff. Let's look at hello component. Hello component looks a lot like ours. It has the selector hello. It also, instead of just template URL, it has the actual template, and in that it's writing the HTML directly in. Basically, there's two ways to do it. You can either use template URL and have the HTML in a different file, or you can do like this and put the HTML right into the component. I like this method if they have the styling right, but it seems like they don't. So I would recommend the template URL method. But for a small thing like this, people tend to use template. Same with styles, you see, they're actually just putting in the code there. You also notice that they're not using quotation marks, they're using back quotation marks, or like back ticks. It's the key to the left of your one. It's got a backtick. This little guy. And it's basically a way to write HTML into the file. Let me say that again. What's going on here? It seems to have killed the app component. I don't know what I did wrong. Did I change something? Whatever.
For
Oh no.
me, I in the app component, I don't have the backticks. I always have the
Oh,
same.
it's in hello.component.tf down here. Hello component.
Oh yeah, there's a backticks, right?
Yes. It is actually a different component. It's much like the original one. It had this extra line in line 9 that we'll talk about later, but it's the same thing as a app component up here. It's using the same thing, creating a selector. It is putting in the HTML just in a slightly different way, putting in the CSS, exporting it as a class, just like down here, we're having export class hello component. And we're actually, just like the app component, we are bringing it into the app module down here. And we are using it inside the app component. If you go to app-component.html, you see hello right in here. You see the hello tag. Just like in our index.html, we see the my app tag. Before we go over much, any questions about anything here? All right.
Not yet.
Let's go
Very
ahead.
confusing so far. Very confusing so far. Let's see how it looks like when we get some new pages or a menu or something.
Yes. I will say if you are confused right now, that's totally fine. Just because Angular is very confusing to start off with. But yeah, let's start off and start creating something. Let's, in our app folder, we see to the right here, we have multiple things you can do. Let's click on this part here. This button right in the middle creates a new folder. And we'll call the folder, let's call it, what do we want here? Call it image. And then inside image, we'll do, you see here there's two buttons. The first one creates a new file. The second one creates a new folder. The pencil renames the folder, and the trash can deletes it. So we'll go ahead and create a new file. We'll call it image dot component, component, image.component.tf. Click enter. We'll also create another file called image.component.html, and one more called image.component.css. And make sure that this folder image is inside the app folder. You can actually see here we have little buttons that we can use to like close and open folders. If we close image, we see it's on the same line as all these ones, app.component. And if you close app, we go back to index. So in our image component.tf, we'll click on that. Make sure we're on image.component.tf up here. And you see it's like italicized right now. You can just like double click on that and it'll go out of italicized. Basically, it means keep this, keep the file here. So like if I open another file, instead of like replacing it, it just makes a new file, so I can like go back and forth here. I'll also say I have noticed this is the exact same layout as VS Code, like almost exactly the same. So if you like this, when you get a chance, download VS Code. It will be very much the same. All right, so image.component.ts. The first thing we'll do is import left curly brace, and then we'll import component, component, component. You also notice I put spaces, like on either side of my word here, between the curly braces, just kind of like what people do. It makes things look nicer. Import component from, and then single quotation marks. In JavaScript, it's better to use single quotation marks, just kind of the go-to. So from single quotation marks, and then let me, in fact, just double check in my app component I'm doing this right. Yep. We'll do at sign, Angular, Angular, /core. Angular core. And if I save it, you see nothing happens, but it does add a semicolon here. Again, when I talked about the linter, a linter is something that does things like add semicolons for you. And the rules of the linter would depend on what linter you use. Some linters like will take away semicolons, but it basically just makes a standard for what kind of style you're using in your code. Any business will have a linter. So we have now imported component from Angular. We'll now do @ and then component with a capital C, quotation marks, curly braces, enter. Then we'll do selector. Again, selector is how you create the tag selector, colon, space, quotation mark, single quotation mark, and then we'll call it, how about my dash image? In general, when making the selector, we want to use no capital letters and always use dashes for, different spaces. I'd also say that you almost always want to have a dash because, this component, you can see I want to have an image in the component. I could call it image, but that would be conflicting with other HTML. So you almost always want to have some kind of dash somewhere in there, just so that you don't accidentally conflict with other HTML. Call it like my image or like app image. Okay, then space, or do you need a comma here? If you ever are not sure how to do it, just go and double check the code you already have. And yeah, you do need commas. So comma, enter. And then we'll do template URL. The U here is capitalized, but the rest aren't. URL, colon, single quotation mark. And then the way to basically get this file is by using something called /. / just says it is the file right next to me. It is like right above or below me or on the same line. So / image dot component.html. And that will get us this HTML file right here. And finally, comma, enter, and then we do style URL, again, U capitalized, R and L are not, colon, comma, or sorry, single quotation, and dot slash image dot component dot CSS. And save. And let me double check my other component, made sure I did that right. Looks good. All right, now we have to do what's called the declaration, which is basically declaring this component as existing. We'll do export class, then we'll name the component. We'll name it my image. Notice the naming convention here using my, all lowercase, the I in image is capitalized. My image, no spaces, no dashes, curly brace. And that should be it. I notice I'm getting an error here. Let me, do I need, no?
No, that would be style URLs. That's not right. That style URL should be a single.
Yeah, let me double check this one. Maybe I just need to do URLs and then add this. Okay, that seemed to fix it. Okay, sorry, my mistake. You need style URLs, and then you do a square braces outside the actual link to the image.component.css. The reason you do this is because I guess like it's already setting it that you can use multiple style sheets. So like, yeah, especially if you get like Bootstrap and stuff, you're gonna need multiple things, or if you have multiple, image.component.css and then like image border.component.css. You rarely actually need to use multiple style sheets, but probably bigger companies need them more. You also notice I didn't put anything inside these curly braces, and that's because I'm not going to write any JavaScript right now. We're just sticking with very basic stuff. I will save it. Nothing happens right now because there's nothing to happen. But we are done with our image.component.tf. We have successfully made the actual component to export out. Right now, the component has nothing in it, nor is it connected to Angular, but we will fix that. We'll go here to our image.component.html, and we'll add something. Let's go ahead and add, we're just writing HTML here, when image, img, and then I'll just, like usual, grab some kind of image. Copy image address. Let's see if that one's good. All right, looks pretty good. I will also post a link to this image in chat and in the description. I know sometimes it's hard to find a good link to a good image, but here is one. And we'll save that. And now our component does something.
But it's not showing anywhere yet, right?
Yes, it's not showing yet. That is because we have not connected it to Angular. I am being vague right now because I'm actually going to show you how to do that. We will go down here to our app.module.tf, down here. And then right after this hello component, we'll make a new line and do import curly brace and then my image. And I'm actually realizing here I got the naming convention wrong. You should do all capital letters, like a capital letter for each word. But we'll go with this for now. my image from quotation mark, and then we will actually need to find this file. We're going to do that by going to image and then to image component.html. So in our app module, we will write dot slash, like normal, basically, next to me, dot slash image slash image dot component. The first image is going to the file image, and the second image is the actual image.component. And again, we don't need to write TF because Angular knows we mean TF. It's just going to find the file with image.component.tf. Now, in our declarations down here, we need to put a...
It's shown in a different color. Why is that?
Oh yeah, it's slightly grayed out because we haven't actually declared it yet. We have to put it into this ng module area. It's just letting you know you haven't actually used this yet. You're not using it. So right after the hello component, we will write comma, space, my image capital I. And now you should see that the image part is, colored correctly with everything else. I will save it. And now we have successfully imported our my image tag and declared it down here. Seems like a lot to add an image, I know, but it is very powerful to be able to use these components in the future. And it is a very good understanding of how to think about modern programming. But you should not see your image yet. We still have one more thing to do. And that last thing is to go to our app.component.html right here. And after the p tags, we just write less than sign, my dash image, greater than sign. And there we go. We have an image right there. And you see stack blitz when you save it and make that end tag for us. And now we have an image.
Oh yeah, I have it open in a different tab, and there it works. It doesn't work in the stack blitz one. I don't know.
Yeah,
But I have the link in another, and it immediately refreshes without clicking on refresh. Actually,
yeah. The one really cool thing about Angular is basically an always open port, which means that instead of having to refresh whenever you change code, it actually changes it as you're writing the code. So you're done writing your code, it will now refresh it.
it's like
or like
with Ajax. It's like Ajax with long polling or something.
To be honest, I'm not entirely sure how it works. I believe I might be using a database term there with always open or continuous port. But basically, or just yeah. In fact, the not having to even click save is a little weird for me because I'm used to with things like ng serve, you click save and then it auto refreshes your page and changes it. But again, it's partially a very powerful thing with Angular and also partially something that StackBlitz is helping you do, which is making it so that it will automatically read your code and change it on the database or change it on the website. And it's not actually refreshing it either, which is an interesting thing, but that's a little complicated. But if you have gotten it working, Good job. You now have actually created a custom, I would call it a custom tag, because that's what it looks like. But I'll actually call it using the Angular definition, which is a component. Again, Angular has a lot of the idea of creating these components for everything you do.
I'm a bit confused where you got the my image without the minus sign from.
Yes. Do you mean in the app module here using like my image
Yeah,
capital I?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, you actually see here in image.ts, we have the selector my dash image, and here we're exporting the class my
Oh,
capital I
in the
image.
class. You have it
Yeah.
in the class.
Basically, this part is just setting up stuff for the HTML. Basically, in the HTML, we'll be writing my dash image. But for actually exporting the class, which is putting it into the app module, you're calling it using a different syntax here, my and then capital I image. All right. And one interesting thing about components is that, you know, we're not just going to make a component every time we want to create an image, but we will make a component every time we want to write a really big thing. Like, here, let me go to, I actually have a website if you didn't know, Programming Masters Universe.com. Is that it? Yes, it is. This is a fully made Angular website, and this chat box here, which took me forever to get working, is a component. It is a very long file. It's a very long file, a ton of code that has components within it that is all contained within its own thing. And I actually made this on a different website. I was making a website for my dad. I made a component in it, or I made the chat box component. And then when I made this website, I just took that component and put it in here. Basically, the idea of a component is that it's entirely self-contained. It does all its JavaScript and everything to do with it all in here. And then you can take it and put it into other websites, or you can take someone else's component and put it into your website. And another great thing is that if there's a problem in your code and it's because of the chat box, like the chat box isn't working, it's not because of this thing up here or this button. It's always going to be just code within the chat box because it's entirely self-contained. But if I go to inspect here and go to my elements, wait, everything is very, there we go, HTML, no, there we go. I can actually see here I have app root, which is actually the more commonly used way of saying my app. I have app main here, and you can see actually I have a whole component here for chat box. There's a lot of extra stuff that HTML adds or Angular adds, but you can see all my little components here. Mat card is actually a component that Angular has. Oh. But chatbox is a component I made, and app header is a component I made. And it has a lot of code in it. Okay. All right. Any questions so far?
No, so far so good.
All right.
And then with this image, so every time you add a new component, it will be that you have to create all three files manually. Isn't there a shorter way to do it?
Good question. For me, I actually just do create all three files, but more specifically, I copy other files I've created. Like I would just like copy these two files and like paste them somewhere else, or I just copy the code within it. I never write the code again, but I usually do just create all three files. But when writing Angular from your local environment, there are tools that help with that. Like, what you can do is do like ng and then new. Oh, sorry, a light was about to fall. Okay, it's good. um, there's various things that help with that, like it will auto generate components for you. But I tend to just write them myself. I'm usually fine, but I just like make the new file and then copy and paste the code. Because I don't think StackBlitz has a terminal here, like you can download stuff like that. They have ng.
I think I found you can put new models or something, Node.js models. I
Let's see.
guess.
They have npm. Um, huh. I will look into that. That would be cool if you can download stuff. Cause it doesn't seem like they have material either, but we'll look into that. All right. So let's have about 30 minutes left. Um, okay, to anyone watching, hopefully you're able to figure that out, make the image, and it's okay if you don't understand anything you did, or if you still have it wrong. If you still have it wrong, you can go ahead and post it on the Facebook, and I can help you out. Maybe post screenshots, or you might be able to like post the link to this. I can find it like in REPL. But if this was too confusing for you, you can stop now and just take some time to understand it. Because now we're going to go into one more confusing thing, which is the actual JavaScript in it. Let's go ahead, and we want a way to be able to declare a variable and put it into our HTML, a lot like we do in jQuery. So what I'm going to do is in this my image part on the image.component.ts, going to go in the curly braces, click enter, make a new line. And one thing that is different about TypeScript is that to make a variable, we type in I'll go text. Text equals quotation mark hello. I don't need to do var or let or anything. You just put in the actual variable you want to make. And to be clear, I am actually creating a variable here. I'm writing basically normal JavaScript and just making a variable. Now, I can use this variable inside my HTML. Just like in jQuery, you could add the append variables and stuff into your HTML. I can do it in a simpler way, which is going into my HTML and typing left curly brace, which makes another curly brace, and then left curly brace again, which makes two curly braces, each like nested within each other. Add some spacing here, get a space on either side of these, and type in text. And I'll save. Shoot it. I do not like this linter at all. I'll have to see if I can disable that. There we go. Now, if I scroll down, I can see hello at the bottom here. And didn't write hello, I wrote curly brace text. That's because the two sets of curly braces tells Angular I am putting in here a variable. And that variable is back here in image.component, which is text equals hello. And let me show you one very fun thing about Angular. I can do hello. And then hello is added right here. I actually didn't even have to save, which is fun. I can save still if I want.
You can check in settings under dev server reload mechanism. You can change that.
Ah,
The
I see.
reload
Oh, hot
trigger you
reload.
can change to save, for example. Instead of edit,
Ah.
you can put save instead if you
Ah,
are
there we go. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I like
more
save
used
better.
to save it. Yeah.
Because when you're doing a local environment, use something called ngserve to create that port, or to create the website, and then in ngserve, every time you save, it reloads. All right, so now when I save, it changes it, and I can just keep changing this variable, saving it, and it will change up here. And you don't have to change the setting if you don't want to, but if you want to, it's here in settings. You see you have files down here, settings, and on hot reload trigger, just click save. I would recommend keeping hot reload because that's fun. All right. So now we have successfully have a variable and injecting it or putting it right into the HTML. And this area, what we're doing it in, is a component, which is inside another component, app, which is inside, well, not another component, but an actual file, index.html. Now let's go ahead and do something fun. I wonder, real quick, if I did a prompt, can you guys see it? Or, you know what? Prompt probably won't even work in Angular. We'll keep text hello, and we will, in our app.ts, let's go outside there. We'll have another variable here. We'll call it, what's the way, maybe get things slightly dynamic. Let's do, well, whatever. We just call it number, and then equals, and then 24. And we'll save it. We'll notice that the linter does add a semicolon for us, but number equals 24. And then we are going to, what we want to do is pass the variable in our parent component. Basically, app is the parent component, and image is the child, because image is within the app component. You see here, we're using my image inside the app component. App is the parent, image is the child. We want to pass a variable from the parent component to the child component. If we had more time, I would have a better reason to be passing a random variable. But trust me, there are many reasons where you're going to be wanting to pass in information, primarily when having databases, because you don't actually want your image component calling the database. You want a whole other file calling the database, and that file will communicate with the app, which will communicate with the image. Don't worry about that. We'll go into that later. But for now, we just want a number variable in our parent component, and we're going to put it into our child component. Here's how we're going to do it. In our image.component.ts, we're going to add, we're going to need to bring in from Angular core. Let me double check what we need to bring in real quick. Yeah. We're going to bring in after component, comma, input. Input is another thing, just like component, another keyword. And then here in the my image area, we know, yeah, my image. We do at input, just like at component, we do at input, and then parentheses, and that's it. Right? If you're ever wondering, you can just double check other code you've made before. Okay, we need to actually do a name as well. At input, and we'll call it number. At input, curly braces, no, parentheses, number. What this is doing is it's saying number is a variable. I am creating a variable called number, but I'm not setting it to anything. That's because I am expecting to get an input into here. I'm expecting to be getting an input.
But since this is TypeScript, don't we have to give a type for it?
Funny thing about TypeScript is that usually you don't actually need to use TypeScript. We can give it types like that, but for the most part, we don't actually need to ever use TypeScript.
Oh, okay.
If the business you're working at uses TypeScript, they're probably going to make you actually use the TypeScript part of it. And depending on your various linters, it will actually give you an error if you don't, give a definition for every variable you make. But there's ways around that too. But for now, we'll just use basic JavaScript. So we have a number, and then in app.component.ts, in app.component.html, we would go into image, and like we're about to add a class, we'll put in number equals curly braces. Notice I'm using double curly braces here because I'm in HTML. I'm using double curly braces. It tends to be the standard to use double curly braces in HTML and single curly braces in JavaScript, just how it's done. So number equals curly braces, and then I'll do quotation marks, and then I'll do curly brace, and then two more right curly braces, and within them, just like I did before, I'll do number. So to reiterate that, number equals quotation mark, left curly brace, number, right curly brace, right curly brace. What this is doing is it's saying, okay, I know in my image you have a variable called number. And you see I do here have a variable called number, or maybe an input called number. Now set number equal to my variable, which is called number. And my variable called number in the app.component.ts, I have number equals 24. So if we now save it and go down here, we haven't actually added number in yet. So actually, one more thing we need to do is that in our image.component.html, we'll do one more thing, left curly brace, get these double curly braces here. And we'll just type in number. And see, we says hello 24 down here. Hello 24. It doesn't seem like much, I know, but the idea is that we have now passed a variable from app component, or the parent, and we're passing that variable down to the image component. This is very helpful when you're like my chat box here. Let me go back there, programming, there we go. Like here, this chat box has a lot of JavaScript code. And there's a lot of code that the entire website is using. For example, the website as a whole actually grabs from my database information about the previous post. It then gives it to my chat box, which it takes it in as an input. And then in each of these components, because I have each little like text thing as a component, it then takes that information and inputs it into each little component. We'll see that a lot in Angular, the idea of taking interactive data and passing it down components that will actually use it. Because the chat box component doesn't use that information, but the text, or I forget what I call it, but whatever component I'm using here does use it.
Does it work the other way around too? So can we access the text hello from the image? One, can we access it in the app or in the main?
Yes, actually, there are ways to go back up. Um, in general, you don't tend to go back up unless for very particular things. Um, in general, the idea is to always be going down, and then sometimes you can go back up. But you never jump things. For example, this component will never call the database. It will never jump like 3 steps up. It will always output stuff to its parent, and that parent will output stuff to its parent, and that parent will output stuff to maybe the database or the backend. We always want things in a nice solid line. Most things will be going in, but sometimes you do need like a button, for example, will need to go back out. So there is something called the output component, just like input. We can use output and then just bring it back out, but that's a little more confusing. Not much more, but you know. But with that, I think that's probably a good start to Angular. Any questions about anything here?
No, not so far.
All right. Um, hopefully the other two regulars will be able to watch the video on this. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Also, if you were just lost, please tell me. Please just tell me I was lost, and I'll try to help you understand it more. I know Angular is a very confusing topic, so next week we'll just keep going over it. And I will say, Angular is an important topic to learn because this is something that's actually, businesses will actually use. But if you can't wrap your mind around it, it's okay. There are either frameworks that businesses will still use, like React and stuff. So if you
React
find that you
View.
really don't understand this, you can just go over to React and learn that instead. And there's other options. But I see that's a pretty good start on Angular. Hopefully you'll be able to learn something from this, and see you same time next week.
Yeah, and maybe next week we can do some input fields or something.
Yeah. Input fields are at least, I find that input fields are always more complicated than necessary, especially with Angular. But yeah, there's a pretty easy way to do inputs in Angular. And then we could do some more interactive stuff. Like the parent component will get information, pass it to the child, and the child will get information, pass it back out. Some more interactive stuff. And my
Yeah,
goal eventually is to go into like databases and stuff, and then we can actually
oh yeah,
create a website
this
and
one
give a URL and
right.
stuff.
This one has Firebase access, for example, or I
Yeah.
think you can also with this. I see they also have a backend one. We can
Oh,
yeah.
whoa! They
They also
have
have
Firebase built in. Oh, look at
yeah.
that!
They have
I
built
am
in.
so
Yes.
excited, man. I am loving this.
Okay.
Yeah, Firebase is a great tool. Yeah, hopefully I wasn't too confusing there, and hopefully we'll be able to keep going with this and make a whole new Angular project. And I would say once you've made a whole project and use Firebase, given a URL, URLs aren't too expensive. You just want to get it for a month, just to have it there.
Yeah, but
And
for now, we can even use the IO address that this
yeah,
one give. This
oh
one
yeah,
gives an IO address, so you have an URL for your projects. As long as you keep the projects public, it's free.
yeah. Um, and I will say there will be slight homework, which is just do what Chris said and copy this little address here and post it in the Facebook once you've completed the work for today, just so I know that you have written the code correctly and were able to do it. And if you weren't, again, tell me in Facebook. If you're just confused, tell me in Facebook. I will try to help you through it.
One more. one more question before we stop. Where would we put JavaScript now? So if I have in this website now, if I would put, for example, a sort algorithm or something, where would I put the JavaScript?
Good question. That would be we would want to okay, a couple of things there. We would mostly want to have functions. We were going to like make functions and then put our more like pure JavaScript in those functions. Like for example, if I were to console.log, I actually can't. I don't think console.log out here even. Let me see what happens. Yeah, you can't console.log out here. You can make a function, and then console.log there, or there's like lifecycle hooks. Like I could write start, I believe. No, it's ng start. Okay, that's to say that that's a very loaded question, and there's a lot of things to go into that. But
Okay.
yes, you cannot write code right here. You can only define variables. Um, and in Angular, there's various things about like run this code when this happens, or like run this code at the start of the website, or when the website is fully loaded, and stuff like that to deal with. But we'll get into all that next week. And have a good rest of your week.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. Bye.
Goodbye. Oh, any more questions? All
No, so far so good.
right. Goodbye.